At 3 a.m., my son sent me a text. "Mom, I know you put $1.5 million into this house, but my mother-in-law doesn't want to see you at the grandson's birthday party." I replied, "Okay." That night, I decided, I'm done. And then I made my final move. No one was ready for what happened next. Dear listeners, before we dive into this story, I ask you to support my channel. It's not difficult at all. Like, subscribe, and write in the comments which city you are listening from. Your support helps stories like mine be heard. Now, get comfortable. Happy listening. The silence at 3 a.m. has a specific weight to it. It is dense, like concrete, and just as cold. In my small 2-bedroom apartment, where the walls are hung with old blueprints and engravings of Italian cathedrals, this hour usually belongs only to me. I am an architect. All my life, I have built structures, calculated loads, and sought harmony in lines. Even now, being retired, I often stay awake going through old projects, checking if they have withstood the test of time. On the desk before me lay an unrolled sheet of vellum, the design for the city library I oversaw 20 years ago. The light of the desk lamp picked the strict lines of the facade out of the gloom. I loved this moment. Just me, the paper, and logic. No chaos. Suddenly, a vibration ran across the lacquered surface of the desk. The phone screen flared up, slicing through the cozy semi-darkness with a harsh white light. Tyler, my son. My heart skipped a beat. It's a habit of any mother. A call or text at this time usually means trouble, a car accident, the hospital. I reached for the phone, trying to stay calm, but there was no plea for help. The message was long. I read it, and the letters seemed to dance before my eyes, forming a sentence, not for me, but for our relationship. "Mom, sorry it's so late. I know you paid $1.5 million for this house. I really am grateful. But Lucinda said she doesn't want to see you at Leo's birthday. She says, you stress the guests out with your lectures and comments. The atmosphere gets heavy. Let's just do dinner next week. Just you and me. Don't be offended." I reread it twice, then a third time. $1.5 million. I closed my eyes and didn't see numbers. I saw years. I saw frosty mornings on construction sites when the wind cut to the bone while I stood supervising the pouring of the foundation to ensure my son's future. I saw my postponed vacations, the old coat I wore for 5 seasons to save every extra penny. I saw my dream a trip to Italy, to the domes of Brunelleschi, which I gave up so Tyler could have a home, not just a house. A glass cube, eco-friendly, smart, a perfect home on the edge of a cliff that I designed myself. I invested not just money, but my soul into it. Every brick was laid under my supervision. And now Lucinda, his mother-in-law, a woman who hasn't worked a day in her life on a construction site, who thinks culture is owning a designer handbag and intelligence is the ability to laugh loudly at stupid jokes. She calls my conversations about art and history lectures. She says I stress the guests out. Of course, because against my background, her emptiness becomes too obvious. And Tyler, my boy, whom I tried so hard to shield from difficulties, grew up to be a man who chooses the path of least resistance. It is easier for him to offend a mother who will forgive everything than to argue with a woman who will throw a tantrum. A coldness spread through my chest. It wasn't that burning feeling of resentment that makes you sob into a pillow. No, this was the cold of steel. The cold you feel when you realize the load-bearing structure of a building has rotted and cannot be saved. Renovation is impossible. Demolition is required. I looked at the screen. Don't be offended. I wasn't offended. I drew conclusions. My fingers touched the screen, typing a reply. I didn't need many words. Architecture does not tolerate unnecessary details. Okay. I hit send. The screen went dark. The room became quiet again, but this silence had changed. It ceased to be cozy. It became the silence before a storm. I got up from the desk. My movements were precise, devoid of fuss. I walked over to the old safe that stood in the corner behind the wardrobe, hidden from prying eyes. I remembered the combination by heart, just as I remember the proportions of the golden ratio. Click, click, click. The heavy door yielded. Inside, among folders of documents and old family photos, lay a thick binder made of gray leather. I took it out and placed it on the desk, right on top of the library blueprint. I opened the binder. Inside lay the original, the deed of gift for the house. For that very house worth $1.5 million, where my son, my grandson, and the woman who decided to erase me from my family's life were sleeping right now. I didn't just gift them the house. I am an architect, but I am the daughter of a lawyer. I know that a foundation must be protected from groundwater and generosity from ingratitude. My gaze slid over the lines of the contract. It was a non-standard transfer document. It was a fee simple subject to condition subsequent. I turned the page and found Clause 14, the clause regarding goodwill and maintenance of family ties. Tyler, signing the documents 5 years ago, didn't even read them. He was so happy, so blinded by the shine of the panoramic windows and the smart home system, that he simply signed where I pointed with a pencil. He trusted me, and I trusted my intuition. This clause stated that the grantor, that is, me, Margaret Vance, has the right to unilaterally revoke the gift and reclaim property rights in the event of a loss of moral connection or a display of overt disrespect by the grantee or members of their family residing on this property. But this clause had a limitation, a statute of limitations. I took my red drafting pencil from the table, the one I usually use to mark critical errors in blueprints. I circled the date of the signing. It was exactly 4 years, 11 months, and 29 days ago. The term of validity for the clause was 5 years. I looked at the wall clock. The hands showed the beginning of 4 a.m. I had exactly 24 hours remaining, 24 hours, until this right disappeared forever and the house finally passed into their undivided ownership. 24 hours to turn this document from a simple paper into a weapon. They thought I would just swallow this, that I would stay home, look out the window, and feel sorry for myself. They didn't understand one thing. I don't build castles in the air. I build fortresses, and every fortress has a secret passage that only the architect knows about. I closed the binder. Tomorrow would be a long day. In the morning, I didn't even approach the mirror. I didn't need to see my reflection to know my face was as gray and immobile as the facade of a Stalinist high-rise. On a cloudy day, I put on a strict, dark charcoal wool dress, buttoned every button up to my throat, and took the binder. The city outside the window was just waking up, but I was already on my way. My old sedan, reliable and unpretentious like myself, carried me away from the center toward the industrial districts. There, among warehouses and concrete fences, was the Office of Second Chance, a charity foundation headed by Frank. Frank was a man of complex fate. In the 90s, he made mistakes for which he paid with 10 years of his freedom. When he got out, no one wanted to hire him. No one except me. I was looking for a foreman then who knew how to keep his word and make others work. I took a risk, and he built the best facilities in the city for me. Now, he was repaying his debt to society, helping guys just like him get back on their feet. His office smelled of cheap coffee and construction dust, a smell that always calmed me more than the aromas of French perfume. Margaret. Frank stood up to meet me. His broad face, carved with deep wrinkles, expressed genuine surprise. This early? Did something happen? I silently placed the gray binder on his desk, right on top of an estimate for purchasing brick. I need your lawyer, Frank, and I need your seal, right now. Frank frowned but didn't ask questions. He had known me for 30 years. If I say now, it means time is running out. He pressed the intercom button, summoned his staff attorney, a young guy in glasses, and gestured for me to sit. I opened the binder and unfolded the deed from 5 years ago. The red pencil circle around the date burned like a warning traffic light. I am activating Clause 14, I said in a level voice. Revocation of property rights based on a violation of the conditions of goodwill. The lawyer, taking the document, scanned the text. His eyebrows crept upward. This is impeccably drafted, he muttered. But Mrs. Vance, do you understand what this means? You are effectively evicting your own son. The term expires. Today at midnight. I know what time it is, I cut him off. Prepare the documents for the reversion of title. Frank sank heavily into his chair. Maggie, he called me by the name only the closest people used. Are you sure? This is war. Tyler won't forgive you for this. Tyler has already made his choice. I looked straight into my old friend's eyes. Yesterday, at 3 a.m., he informed me that I am superfluous at the celebration of his new family's life. I paid $1.5 million for that house, Frank. I put everything into it. and now they tell me I stress the guests out. I paused, feeling the tremor in my hands that I was so diligently suppressing, trying to break through. I clenched my fists under the table. But I am not here to take the house for myself, I continued. I don't need that glass cube. There's too much echo. I want to transfer it. Transfer it? Frank leaned forward. To whom? To you. Or rather, to your foundation. Silence hung in the office. You could hear the old refrigerator humming in the corner and the cheap plastic clock ticking on the wall. Are you joking? Frank exhaled. Do I look like a person who jokes at 8 a.m.? I took out the second document I had prepared during the night, a deed of gift from me to the Second Chance Foundation. Designated purpose: creation of a rehabilitation center and halfway house for individuals released from correctional facilities and finding themselves in difficult life situations. Frank took the paper. His hands, accustomed to holding a sledgehammer, trembled slightly. Maggie, that's a mansion, an elite gated community. The neighbors will eat us alive. The neighbors can't do anything. The land is privately owned. The zoning of the lot allows for the placement of social facilities. I checked the city planning code. I allowed myself a barely perceptible, hard smile. Besides, your guys need housing, and my son and his mother-in-law need a lesson. A cruel one, but necessary. This is the nuclear option, Frank said quietly. If we sign this, there is no turning back. You are destroying their world. I remembered Tyler's message. I remembered how Lucinda, that woman with the fake smile and empty eyes, gradually pushed me out of the house I built. How she changed the curtains I chose, how she rearranged the furniture, breaking the composition, how she forbade my grandson from touching my books. They wanted me to become invisible, a shadow that simply transfers money. They wanted me to disappear, I said, and my voice sounded hard, like the strike of a hammer. Now I will disappear. But along with the roof over their heads, where is the pen? The lawyer silently handed me a heavy fountain pen. I didn't hesitate for a second. A signature. Another one. The date. The seal. The sound with which the stamp descended onto the paper was like a shot from a silencer. Dull. Final. The transaction is registered, the lawyer said, typing quickly on his laptop. Thanks to electronic filing, the transfer of title will happen within a few hours. By this evening, the foundation will be the legal owner. I stood up. Inside me was a strange emptiness. No gloating, no triumph, only the feeling of a job done. As if I had demolished a condemned building that threatened to collapse on passers-by. Thank you, Frank. Expect guests. Soon they will realize the locks have changed. I walked out of the stuffy office into the street. The autumn air was cold and clear. I inhaled deeply, trying to fill the void in my chest with oxygen. I was already approaching the car when my hand habitually reached into my purse for my phone. Why? Probably a masochistic desire to check if my son had written, "Mom, I was wrong." There were no messages, but there was a notification from social media. The algorithms helpfully shoved a story from user at Lucinda, Lux, Life in My Face. I tapped on the circle with her photo. The video loaded instantly. On the screen was my garden, the very garden where I had planted rare varieties of hydrangeas, selecting them by shade so the bloom would flow from one color to another like a watercolor painting. The camera was shaking. Lucinda was filming herself while walking. She was wearing a loud, tasteless coat the color of fuchsia. "Well, girls, I finally got around to it," she broadcasted in a shrill, affected voice, poking a manicured finger into space. "Next week, everything here will be different. I'm sick of this boredom, this grandma style." The camera swung around and stared at my gazebo, my wrought iron gazebo. I had ordered it from the best blacksmiths, based on 19th century sketches. That was where I loved to sit in the mornings with a cup of tea, looking at the fog over the river. It was my sanctuary, my place of power. "We are tearing down this eyesore first thing," Lucinda announced joyfully, walking closer and kicking the elegant wrought iron leg with an expensive boot. "There's going to be a BBQ zone here, with a huge grill and a jacuzzi." Otherwise, the old owner apparently thought a garden was for reading books, not relaxing like normal people. It's laughable. "All right, girls, kisses to everyone. Get your outfits ready for the party." The video cut off. I stood in the middle of the dirty industrial parking lot, gripping the phone until my knuckles turned white. The pity that still glimmered somewhere at the very bottom of my soul, a tiny, irrational pity of a mother for her child, went out. Lucinda had just signed her own sentence. She wanted to demolish my gazebo. Well then, I opened my contacts and dialed Frank's number. "Frank," I said, looking at the darkened screen, "don't delay the move. Send the guys today, and tell them not to be shy." I returned to my apartment, but my thoughts remained there, on the cliff. I knew their schedule better than they did. I knew that at this moment, inside the glass cube, it wasn't joyful anticipation of a holiday that rained, but nervous, bustling, masked as fun. My short okay had worked exactly as I calculated. For Tyler and Ashley, that word was the all-clear signal. They exhaled. I could literally, physically feel their relief. "Mom, calm down," Tyler surely told his wife. "She understood her place," Lucinda added triumphantly. "They decided my pride was broken, that I swallowed the insult and accepted the role of the outcast. Fools. They didn't understand that in statics, okay is not agreement. It is the state of a system before a planned collapse." I sat at my computer and opened the smart home control panel. I programmed this system myself. I knew every sensor, every drive, every logic node. On the large monitor before me, the life of my former house unfolded in the form of graphs, video streams, and activity logs. On the screen from the camera at the gate, I saw a courier. Frank worked fast. A motorcyclist in a bright yellow uniform dismounted at the wrought iron gate and rang the bell. In his hands was a thick envelope with a red stripe. Notice of change of ownership. An official document, a legal bomb. Tyler opened the door. He looked harried. The sleeves of his expensive white shirt were rolled up, his hair disheveled. He held a phone with his shoulder, explaining something to the catering service. "Yes, the champagne must be ice cold," he shouted into the receiver, not looking at the courier. The guy held out a tablet for a signature. "Delivery for Mr. Vance." "Yes, that's me. Give it here." Tyler impatiently scribbled with the stylus on the screen, not even glancing at the sender's name. He snatched the envelope. My heart beat steadily, like a metronome. "Read it," I mentally ordered. "Read what is written on the envelope, son. Understand what you have just lost." But Tyler didn't read it. He threw the envelope onto the console table in the hallway, right on top of a mountain of gift boxes tied with gold and scarlet ribbons. For him, it was just another card, another bill, another trifle distracting from the main event of the year, his mother-in-law's triumph. The party they were preparing had nothing to do with my 5-year-old grandson. Leo needed friends, cake, and a chance to run around. But Lucinda arranged a high society gala. I saw the guest lists in their family chat, from which they forgot to remove me. Useful people, officials, business partners, before whom Lucinda wanted to flaunt wealth she had no relation to. I turned away from the hallway camera. Looking at my son was painful, but pity for him was now mixed with disgust. He chose his blindness himself. Suddenly, an alarm window popped up on my monitor, pulsing red. Warning: attempt to change administrator rights. I frowned. Someone was trying to get into the root security settings. I quickly checked the log. The request came from a tablet in the living room. Lucinda. Of course. It wasn't enough for her to kick me out physically. She wanted to erase my presence in the digital space too. She was trying to change the master code, so I couldn't even remotely open the gates if I suddenly decided to come. She wanted to lock the castle from the inside. Lines of code ran across the screen. She was entering standard passwords. The grandson's birth date, names, simple combinations, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Tyler Vance. Naive. I protected this system with 256-bit encryption. Access denied. Access denied. User lockout for 60 minutes. I imagined her face at that moment. Twisted with malice, bewildered. She was surely poking the screen with her long nail, cursing the stupid technology. "You want to control the house, Lucinda?" I whispered, looking at the blinking cursor. "You want everything to be your way? Well then. Architecture is the art of creating an environment. Let's create an environment that matches your insides." My fingers flew across the keyboard. I entered the manual climate control mode. The house was designed as a thermos. It held heat perfectly, but the air conditioning system was powerful, designed for hot summers. I found the tab for living room and banquet hall. Current temperature, 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Comfort, coziness, warmth. I slid the bar to the left. Target temperature, 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Not enough for pipes to burst, but quite enough to make guests in evening dresses with open shoulders feel uncomfortable. The cold penetrates slowly, imperceptibly. First, the hands get chilly, then the cold grips the shoulders, and finally, it starts to seem like icy air is emanating from the walls themselves. Next step, radiant heating. The zone heating was the pride of this project, porcelain stoneware, which is so pleasant to walk on barefoot. Status: off. Now the floors would become slabs of ice. The stone would instantly cool down, sucking the heat out of the room. And the final touch: lighting. I always taught Tyler that light is mood. Warm light, 2700 Kelvin. Relaxes, creates intimacy, hides skin flaws, and makes faces more beautiful. It is candlelight, the light of a hearth. That was exactly how the light was set for the party. I opened the scenario settings. Evening, color temperature, 6500 Kelvin. This is the color of an operating room, the color of a morgue. Cold, harsh, sterile white light that knows no mercy. It highlights every wrinkle, every layer of plaster on a face, every spot on clothing. Under such light, food looks unappetizing, and people look sick and tired. It causes subconscious anxiety, a desire to leave, to flee. I pressed the apply button and locked the ability to manually change settings from the wall panels. On the monitor, the indicators began to change. The temperature graph slowly crawled down. I leaned back in my chair. In my apartment, it was quiet and warm, but there, in the $1.5 million house, a climatic winter was beginning. They wanted a Cold War. They got it. Now all that remained was to wait. Frank said the guests would arrive at the very height of the fun. In the meantime, let Lucinda try to explain to her socialites why the atmosphere in her luxurious mansion resembled the waiting room of a county hospital in November. I closed the laptop. It was time for tea. The tea in the porcelain cup had gone cold, covered with a thin film, but I hadn't taken a single sip. Not just an Avenger, but a professional, an engineer, had woken up inside me. When you see a crack in the facade, you can just plaster over it, or you can start digging deep to find the cause of the foundation settling. Lucinda was the crack, and her behavior was hysterical animal aggression. This maniacal desire not to let me on the threshold of my own house did not fit into the simple scheme of an evil mother-in-law. People who have money and status behave differently. They are condescending, they ignore, they don't wage war. Lucinda behaved like a beast, cornered in a hole, baring its teeth at anyone who approaches. I set the cup aside and pulled the laptop toward me again. This time, I closed the smart home control panel. I needed different tools. Over 40 years of working as a chief architect, I had accumulated connections that don't disappear with retirement. My address book was worth more than gold. I dialed the number of Linda, an old friend from the county clerk's office. She still worked as a department head, sitting in the same office with dusty ficus plants where we once approved zoning plans. "Margaret?" Her voice creaked in the receiver with surprise. "It's been years. Did you decide to get back in the game?" "No, Linda. A private matter. I need to check a property and a person." I dictated the address of Lucinda's elite apartment in the city center to her, that very apartment she bragged about so much, talking about the 19th century moldings and having a famous artist as a neighbor. Lucinda always emphasized that she was living with Tyler temporarily, while a grandiose renovation was underway in her penthouse. Keys clattered in the receiver. I heard this rhythmic sound and imagined the cursor on Linda's screen crawling down the database. "Strange," Linda muttered. A minute later, a string tightened inside me. "What is it?" The object at this address was sold. 6 months ago, in May. I froze. Sold by whom? By the owner, of course. Citizen Lucinda Sterling. A direct deal, quick price. About 20% below market value. Apparently, she was in a big hurry. And where is she registered now? The pause dragged on. The keys clattered more anxiously. "Maggie." Linda's voice became quieter. "She owns no property at all. No apartment, No summer house, not even a garage, a blank slate. Her last registered address was annulled upon sale. Formally, she is a transient, homeless. I slowly lowered the hand with the phone to the table, switching to speakerphone. Thank you, Linda. Check one more thing. The civil court records. I already knew the answer, but I needed documentary confirmation. A minute later, Linda whistled. Wow, there's a whole bouquet here. 3 liens, credit card judgments, payday loans, and, wait a minute, a lawsuit from the Golden Phoenix Casino. That's that shady network they raided last year. Gambling debts. Maggie, who have you gotten involved with? The debt is almost $400,000. All her assets went to auction to cover just a part of it. I thanked my friend and hung up. A ringing silence hung in the room. The puzzle clicked into place. Click. Lucinda wasn't just visiting Tyler. She wasn't renovating her apartment. She didn't have an apartment. She was bankrupt. A gambling addict who had lost everything. Her home, her reputation, her future. That's why she clung to my son so tightly. That's why she gradually moved her things in. I remembered how a month ago I noticed that the guest wing 2 rooms with a separate entrance that I designed for Tyler's friends turned out to be locked. Tyler waved it off then. There's storage for Lucinda's things during the renovation. It wasn't storage. It was her life. Those boxes I saw briefly on the cameras, that was everything she had left. She moved in with us, not temporarily. She moved in forever, like a parasite that embeds itself in a healthy organism when its own host dies, and that was exactly why she was driving me out so furiously. I was the only threat. I, as the owner and creator of the house, could walk into the guest wing at any moment. I could see that it wasn't just boxes, but a lived-in space. I could ask questions. I could check. She needed to isolate Tyler from me to preserve her legend of the wealthy mother-in-law who was simply helping the young couple. If Tyler found out his mother-in-law was kicked out not because of her character but because of the fear of exposing a destitute gambler, everything would collapse. She went all in, and the stake was my house. I opened the video stream from the surveillance cameras again. Now I looked at what was happening with different eyes. I didn't see a haughty socialite pacing the living room in a fuchsia dress. I saw a con artist, a homeless woman who stole my family to secure a warm old age at my expense. She stood now in the middle of the hall, wrapping herself in a fur stole, and yelled at the staff, demanding they check the heating. She was shivering, but not only from the cold I had driven into the house. She was shivering from the fear that her house of cards would crumble. She didn't know the foundation had already been blown up. On the screen, I saw Tyler walk up to her, hugging her shoulders, calming her down. He looked bewildered. He thought it was just a technical glitch. He still believed he lived in his house with his wealthy mother-in-law, who would soon gift her grandson an apartment downtown. Poor, naive boy. He didn't even suspect he was feeding a person who would drag him to the bottom. I felt something harden inside me. If up to this moment I had doubts, maybe I'm too cruel. Maybe I should just talk. Now they evaporated. Talking to parasites is useless. They need to be exterminated. I shifted my gaze to the clock. Time was ticking. The second chance bus had surely already left the garage. You wanted to live beautifully, Lucinda? I whispered to the screen. You wanted to hide your poverty? Well, tonight your secret will become public knowledge. The irony is that you invited the audience to your own execution yourself. I closed the laptop lid. It was time to get ready. I couldn't miss the finale of this play. I had to see their faces when the masks were ripped off. I went to the closet. I needed something strict, black. Mourning attire for their illusions. I stopped the car in the shadow of a tall arbor vitae, about 50 yards from the gates. The engine died, and I rolled down the window, letting in the frosty air. From here, my glass cube was visible in the palm of my hand, and the spectacle was, I must admit, surreal. Because of my lighting settings, the house shone with a deathly pale, surgical light, slicing through the cozy twilight of the neighborhood. Through the panoramic windows, I saw the guests. They resembled frozen mannequins in the window of an expensive boutique. Women in evening gowns wrapped themselves in shawls and their partners' suit jackets. Men shifted from foot to foot, pretending that 60 degrees indoors was the latest word in European freshness fashion. Lucinda darted between them like a wounded bird. She was wearing a heavy velvet dress, the color of overripe cherries, and a fur coat she didn't take off. I saw her forcibly shoving glasses of champagne into the hands of shivering guests, laughing loudly, throwing her head back, and actively telling stories, trying to distract them from the fact that they could see their breath. It was theater of the absurd. A feast during the Ice Age. Suddenly, the music, which barely reached the street, was drowned out by the strained roar of an engine. It wasn't the soft purr of a Mercedes or Bentley that the residents of this neighborhood were used to. It was the cough of an old, tired diesel. And bus screeched to a halt at the gates. It was an old school bus, painted white with rust streaks along the sides. On its side, stenciled in paint, was the logo. 2 hands breaking chains, and the inscription in large letters, Foundation, Second Chance. The bus stopped right across the driveway, blocking a polished SUV belonging to some official. The doors hissed open, the music in the house died down. Guests, happy for an excuse to leave the refrigerator, drifted toward the windows and the veranda. Frank stepped out of the bus first. He was in his unchanging leather jacket with a folder under his arm, calm as a rock. Behind him, clattering boots on the asphalt, his charges began to disembark. 12 men. These were not the people usually seen at buffets in this zip code. Tough men with faces on which life had left deep scars, shaved heads, wearing work coveralls stained with lime and paint. On the forearms of many, blue tattoos were visible rings, Gothic fonts. They unloaded efficiently, without fuss. One carried out an aluminum stepladder, 2 others hauled heavy toolboxes. A fourth, a huge guy with a broken nose, easily threw a sledgehammer over his shoulder. They didn't look at the dumbfounded guests in tuxedos. They looked at the house as an object, as a job site. The wicket gate swung open, and Tyler ran out to meet them. He was without a jacket, in just a shirt, and he was shaking from cold or from horror. "Hey, who are you?" His voice cracked into a falsetto. He ran up to Frank, trying to block his path. "You can't park here. We have a private event. Move the bus. You're blocking the exit for the guests." Lucinda was already standing on the porch, gripping the railing. Her face, even in that deathly light, seemed whiter than chalk. She understood. The instinct of a grifter told her this wasn't just workers. Frank stopped. He measured Tyler with a look that held neither anger nor sympathy, only tired resolve. "We aren't parking, Tyler," Frank pronounced loudly, so everyone could hear. His bass rolled over the lawn, drowning out the guests' whispers. "What do you mean not parking? This is private property. I'm calling the neighborhood security right now," my son squealed. Frank slowly opened the folder and took out the very document with the seal we had signed in the morning. He unfolded it in front of Tyler's face like a shield. "No need to call security. Our papers are in order." Frank took a step forward, forcing Tyler to retreat. "As of yesterday, this house no longer belongs to your mother. She donated it to a foundation helping former convicts." A gasp ran through the crowd of guests. Someone dropped a glass. The sound of shattering glass rang out like a shot. "What?" Tyler froze, staring at the paper with a senseless gaze. "Mom donated. To whom?" "To us." Frank nodded at his guys, who were already efficiently measuring the width of the gates with a tape measure to bring in bunk beds. "We live here now, Tyler." Frank smiled, but his eyes remained cold. "According to the Foundation's charter, this will be a dormitory." "Guys, bring it in," he commanded, waving his hand. "We start with the living room. Lots of space there. Fits 20 cots. And better move the Bentley from the driveway. It's blocking the cement unloading." Frank's words hung in the icy air, heavy and inevitable, like a concrete slab falling from a crane. For a second, absolute ringing silence reigned, in which only the heavy breathing of 12 strong men and the distant barking of a dog could be heard. And then, this silence was torn by a scream. "Get out of here!" Lucinda flew off the porch, tangling in the hem of her cherry dress. Her face was twisted, the mask of a society lady cracked, revealing the bared teeth of a market fishwife. "Get out! This is private territory. I'll call the police. I'll sue you all." She flew at Frank, raising a hand with long, predatory nails at him. But he didn't even flinch. He stood, legs wide apart, calm as a cliff against which dirty waves crash. "Calling the police is your right, ma'am," he rumbled, not raising his voice. "Only I'm afraid they'll have more questions for you than for us. We have title deeds, do you?" Frank slowly, with deliberate care, took the envelope the courier had brought during the day out of his jacket pocket, the very envelope Tyler had carelessly thrown on the console table. "Tyler," Frank held the envelope out to my son, "this is an eviction notice. You signed for it yourself today at 2:30 p.m. Your signature?" Tyler, white as a sheet, took the envelope with trembling hands. He looked at it as if he were holding a venomous snake. I thought it was a delivery," he stammered. "You should have thought earlier," Frank cut him off. "According to the law, you have 24 hours to vacate the premises of personal belongings. Everything remaining after this period becomes the property of the foundation and will be used for the dormitory needs." Time has started. Frank ostensibly looked at his wristwatch, then nodded to his guys. "Let's work, men. Start dismantling the bar counter. Bunk beds go there. Take the paintings off the walls. Stack them neatly on the lawn." The shaved-headed guys moved toward the house as a united front. The guests, seeing this inexorable force, shied away in panic, clutching purses and glasses to their chests. Someone ran to their cars, someone just froze in a stupor. I realized it was time. I opened the car door and stepped onto the gravel. The frost immediately burned my face, but this cold was pleasant to me. It was sobering. I adjusted the collar of my black coat and slowly walked toward the gates. I didn't cross the line. I stopped exactly at the mailbox on the property line. Now this was foreign land, foundation land. I respected boundaries in blueprints and in life. Tyler saw me first. In the light of the floodlights beaming from the house windows, I must have looked like a ghost. His eyes went wide. He tossed the envelope aside and rushed toward me. He ran clumsily, stumbling in his unbuttoned shirt. I noted with bitterness that he wasn't running like a son to a mother, but like a frightened child to the one who always solved his problems. But there was no remorse in his eyes. There was the terror of loss. "Mom!" he screamed, running up to the fence. He gripped the cold bars separating us. "Mom, have you lost your mind? Do you see what they're doing? Stop them!" I looked at him calmly, feeling a strange detachment. Somewhere inside, deep down, a mother's heart was bleeding, but my architect's mind had already poured concrete over that foundation. "I can't stop them, Tyler," I said quietly. "It's no longer my house." "You couldn't have done this," his voice broke into a squeal. "It's $1.5 million. $1.5 million, Mom. You spent your life savings on it. You couldn't just take it and give it to some cons. That's my inheritance." Money. Again, money. Not "this is our home," not "your grandson grew up here." 1.5 million. He didn't see walls that held warmth. He saw numbers in a bank account. "It was a home, Tyler," I replied, and my voice sounded harder than steel. "I built it as a fortress for a family, but there is no family there anymore. And if there is no family, why are the walls needed? Now it's just an asset. A tax write-off." I paused, watching as behind Tyler's back, workers carried a huge, tasteless painting in a gold frame out of the living room, a portrait of Lucinda as an empress, which she had hung in the most prominent spot. "And you know, Tyler," I continued, nodding at the workers, "unlike you and your new in-laws, these people know the value of a second chance. They know what it is to lose everything and build life anew. You don't know that, but you will soon." "You monster!" Lucinda's wail rang out. She saw me. Seeing the culprit of her world's collapse, she finally lost her human guise. Forgetting the guests, her status, the cold, she rushed toward me. Her face was twisted with rage, her mouth open in a silent scream, hands clawed like a harpy. "It's you! It's all you! You old witch!" she screeched, rushing across the lawn. "I'll kill you! I'll scratch your eyes out!" She ran straight at me. Tyler recoiled, not trying to stop her. He just watched. But she didn't reach me. Her path was blocked, silently, harmoniously, like a single mechanism. 3 of the Foundation's guys, those very ex-cons the guests feared so much, stepped forward and stood between me and the enraged fury. They didn't raise their hands, didn't make a single aggressive movement. They simply stood as a wall, shoulder to shoulder. The huge guy with the scar across his cheek crossed his arms over his chest and looked down at Lucinda. There was so much calm, heavy contempt in his gaze that she slammed into that look like into a brick wall. She stopped a foot and a half away from them, gasping, spitting saliva. "Don't touch me," she hissed, trying to get around the living wall. "Let me through. I'll show her. She stripped me of everything." "Lady," the huge guy droned, not moving. "Step away from Mrs. Vance." "Your arms are too short." Lucinda froze. She looked around. Her guests stood around. Ladies in furs, officials with glasses, her daughter Ashley clutching the grandson. All of them looked at her. The floodlight mercilessly illuminated her distorted face, runny mascara, disheveled hair. She realized she was losing, that her show was over, and then the hysteria was replaced by panic, real, animal panic of a trapped beast realizing the hole is blocked with stones. She turned to Tyler, then to Ashley, then back to me. Her eyes darted, seeking salvation. "You don't understand," she wheezed, and her voice broke. "You can't kick me out. Not now. Not in winter." She grabbed Tyler by the shirt sleeve, jerking him like a doll. Tell them I'm staying. Make them leave." "Mom." "Lucinda." Tyler tried to pry her fingers off. "We'll get a hotel for a couple of days until we sort this out." "What the hell hotel?" she shrieked, and that scream echoed through the entire neighborhood. "With what money? I have no money for a hotel. I have nothing at all." She cut herself off, but it was too late. The words had flown out. The silence became absolute. Even the workers stopped rattling furniture. Ashley, standing on the porch, slowly descended one step. "Mom?" she asked quietly. "What are you talking about? You have the apartment on Park Avenue. The renovation. You sold the vacation home to invest in the business." Lucinda began to shake. She realized she had just committed suicide. Public social suicide. "There is no apartment," she screamed into her daughter's face, sobbing. "There's no apartment. I sold it 6 months ago. I sold everything. Everything. Debts, collectors, those damn cards. I'm empty. I don't have a dime." She collapsed to her knees right in the mud, mixed with snow, staining her velvet dress. She raised her hands to the sky and then pointed a trembling finger at the house. "I have nowhere to go," she howled. "Do you hear? I have nowhere to go. This house was my last chance. I was going to live here. You idiots. I was going to live here until I died." Her scream hung over the lawn, pathetic and terrible. The mask of the rich mother-in-law lay in the dirt beside her. The guests, her elite friends, began backing toward the gates, averting their eyes. No one wants to look at someone else's collapse. No one wants to get dirty on someone else's poverty, which just a minute ago dressed itself in gold. I stood by the mailbox and looked at the woman who wanted to destroy me. Now she lay at my son's feet, and the truth I dug up in the morning had become public knowledge. Tyler stood looking down at his mother-in-law. His mouth fell open. He was digesting the information. No apartment, no money. She lived here not because she was helping, but because she had nowhere to sleep. He looked at me. In his eyes read the question, "Did you know?" I just barely nodded. "Yes, son, I knew. And now you know. Welcome to reality." Ashley didn't rush to comfort her mother. She stepped over the mud in which Lucinda knelt and, hoisting the crying Leo into her arms, rushed to the fence bars where I stood. In her eyes, there was no plea, only the desperation of a predator having its prey taken away. She held the child out in front of her like a living shield. Leo, frightened by the screams, the cold, and the strange men in overalls, sobbed, smearing tears over his chubby cheeks. "Are you happy?" Ashley screamed, and her voice, usually sugary, now grated on the ears like metal on glass. "Look at him! That's your grandson! You're throwing him out into the freezing cold! You're making him homeless because of your ambition. What kind of grandmother does that? You're a monster, Margaret. You're just an old, heartless monster." Tyler stood nearby, hanging his head. He didn't stop his wife. He waited for this final argument, the tear of a child, to pierce my armor. They were used to Leo being the trump card that beats any hand. The guests, who had already started backing toward their cars, froze. The drama took a new turn. Everyone waited for my reaction, waited for the grandmother to break, cry, open the gates, and say, "All right, live here, just don't cry." I looked at my grandson. My heart squeezed, painfully, sharply. He was guilty of nothing. But I knew if I gave in now, I wouldn't save him. I would only prolong the agony and allow him to grow up in this lie, absorbing Lucinda's poison and Tyler's weakness. Surgery is bloody, but it saves lives. I slowly unbuttoned the top button of my coat and took another document out of the inner pocket, a thin white folder. Stop the hysterics, Ashley, I said quietly, but in a way that silenced her. I am not throwing my grandson onto the street. I am throwing out parasites, and I have taken care of my grandson. I pushed the folder through the fence bars. Ashley, still clutching the child with one arm, grabbed it with the other. What is this? It's a trust agreement, I explained, looking her straight in the eye. The Leo Tyler Vance Educational and Housing Fund. Tyler raised his head. Hope flickered in his extinguished gaze. Everything is paid for there, I continued, enunciating the words. Private school for Leo for 10 years in advance. Medical insurance. And the lease of a 3-bedroom apartment in a residential neighborhood. Not a palace, not a smart home on a cliff, but a warm, clean apartment with renovations. There is furniture. You can move in tonight. The keys are with the notary. He is waiting for your call. Ashley frantically flipped through the pages. Her face changed. She saw numbers. She saw salvation. She saw that I hadn't left them to die under a fence. But there is one condition, I added, raising my voice so the one still kneeling in the center of the yard could hear. Clause 7. I call it the parasite clause. Ashley froze, staring at the text. What condition? Tyler asked hoarsely. Funding ceases immediately and irrevocably, I declared. If citizen Lucinda Sterling spends even one night in that apartment, or if she resides with you under one roof at any other address paid for by the trust funds. A silence hung, more terrible than the screams before. It was a choice, a cruel, pragmatic choice. A roof over their heads, education for their son, and a quiet life or loyalty to a mother who gambled everything away, lied to them for 6 months, and led them to the edge of the abyss. Lucinda slowly rose from her knees. Her cherry dress was hopelessly ruined by mud. She looked at her daughter. In her gaze was confidence. She raised Ashley in her own image. They were a team. Ashley, Lucinda rasped, reaching out a hand. Baby, don't listen to her. We'll come up with something. We're family. Let's get out of here. Spit in her face. Ashley lifted her eyes from the document. She looked at her mother, dirty, pathetic, ruined. Then she looked at the glass cube, which was already being filled by stern men carrying out her things. Then at the crying Leo. And finally, at me. In her eyes, I saw a calculator working. Ashley loved comfort. Ashley loved stability. And Lucinda had just admitted she had nothing but debts. Ashley slowly closed the folder and pressed it to her chest like the most precious treasure. Ashley? Lucinda's voice trembled. You lied to us, Mom, Ashley said. Her voice was icy. You said you had money. You said you sold the apartment to buy a villa in Spain. And you gambled it all away. I wanted to make it better. I wanted to win it back for you, Lucinda wailed. You almost cost Leo everything. Ashley took a step back, retreating from her mother. She turned to Tyler. Tyler, call the notary. We're picking up the keys. Ashley! Lucinda screamed, taking a step toward her daughter. Don't come near me, Ashley barked. Did you hear the conditions? If you come with us, we lose the apartment, and I have nowhere to take my child. Deal with your debts yourself. Tyler, always led, looked at his wife, then at his mother-in-law, and silently took out his phone. He chose a side, the side where it was warm and free. The guests, watching this scene, finally understood. The party was over. The illusion of a rich family crumbled to dust. A shameful flight began. A lady in furs, who just half an hour ago admired Lucinda's generosity, moved sideways toward the exit. In her hands, she tightly gripped a box with an expensive kitchen mixer, a gift for the birthday boy. Where are you going, Mrs. Vanderwall? I shouted venomously, unable to resist. What about the cake? The lady quickened her pace, pretending not to hear. Wait! Lucinda suddenly screamed, throwing herself toward the guests. Help me, somebody! I need somewhere to crash for a couple of days. Isolde, we're friends. Sorry, Lucy. We're renovating, Mrs. Vanderwall mumbled, diving into her car. One by one, the friends dissolved into the darkness, taking the gifts with them. No one left even a toy car for Leo. They took everything, realizing this family had nothing to give back anymore. Lucinda was left standing alone in the middle of the emptying yard, rejected by her daughter, abandoned by friends, destroyed by her enemy. And then the front door of the house swung wide open. Two of Frank's guys came out onto the porch. In their hands, they carried a huge, tacky painting in a heavy, gilded frame. Some landscape with swans that Lucinda bought for insane money at an art fair, claiming it was future classic. "Where does this go?" asked one of the guys, shouting over the wind. Frank, standing by the entrance with a tablet, waved his hand toward the lawn. "Put it on the grass. And bring out those plastic Greek goddess statues too, and those 3-foot vases. No place for them in the dorm. They just collect dust." The guys dropped the masterpiece with a crash right onto the withered grass, leaning it against the wrought iron fence. Following it came a gilded floor lamp shaped like a palm tree, then boxes of Chinese porcelain that Lucinda passed off as antiques. The lawn in front of the house, conceived as a model of landscape minimalism, was rapidly turning into a flea market. Things with which Lucinda tried to buy status now lay in the dirt, useless to anyone, ridiculous and pathetic in their cheap pretentiousness. Frank walked up to the fence and looked at Lucinda, who stood hugging herself, shaking from the cold. "Ma'am," he said professionally, "if you need any of this junk, take it now. In an hour, we're calling the garbage truck." I turned around and walked to my car. I had enough. I didn't want to see how she would dig through the pile of things, trying to save her fake treasures. I sat behind the wheel. My hands weren't shaking. In the rearview mirror, I saw Tyler and Ashley getting into their taxi, not even glancing at Lucinda. The lights of the glass cube changed from deathly white to ordinary warm. The new owners were reconfiguring the house for themselves. I turned the ignition. The road to the airport awaited me ahead, but first, I needed to pack a suitcase. This time, a real suitcase for a real life.